guys who have been able to join, all the participants. It's not easy for you to dedicate your Saturday to something, but honestly, I've also been logged in since morning, and this is very informational. Um, you can never know all. That's the truth, right? And I I have learned a lot from Joe, from Doctor, from Moses, and from Blake. Blake's session was awesome, and I'm gonna echo a little bit of what Blake said. So I'm not a very big PowerPoint guy, but I'm gonna try my best and see what I can do here. First of all, my screen disappeared, so I can't see any of you. Anyway, can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
100%.
Yes, yes, sir.
Can you see my screen?
Of
Yes,
course
yes,
we
we can.
can.
All right. So I'm going to be talking about AWS databases today. I'm going to throw a little bit of light on a few things. Um, I was thinking I was going to be able to, sorry, my laptop is this way. So I was thinking I was going to be able to, okay, I think I just did that, kind of move my screen. So I will do this. Give me a second, guys. I'll stop this and I'll reshare. Can you guys see the same screen?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. So my laptop is on the side, and if I put in this way, I'm just going to be looking at this way while you'll be seeing my side. So I want to be sure that I am talking to all of you. So uh, I'm not here today to showcase a lot, right? But to show you how basic knowledge of certain technologies can be confidently applied to your resume, and how much of a change it can make in landing you a great job offer, right? Um, as time does not allow me to go in depth or do in-depth overview of all the features of the RDBMSs, I would like to throw a highlight that will make it possible and or also give you courage to add some value to your resume, as you would have acquired basic to mid-level knowledge of the popular databases in AWS. So I dived into AWS because I realized that coming out as a SQL Server database administrator, I had a lot of options, but at some point when the cloud infrastructure really took over, or cloud computing, it made me look as though my skills were not very relevant, right? It kind of made me feel like they needed more from the database administrators. And if you look at the job descriptions today, it is no longer just easily Microsoft SQL Server Database Administrator. They just say we need a database administrator, right? Because a company could be using SQL Server today and they acquire another company tomorrow, and that company they acquired is using Oracle, or maybe they're going into cloud, Azure to AWS or something. So I kind of realized that I needed to be multi-skilled, right? So I'm going to display a few things here today, and from what I'm going to display, you're probably going to, at the end of the session, maybe go back home, register a little AWS account, do the few things that I did, and then you would have the confidence to actually go back to your resume and add a little bit of something that could make a big difference by next week or so. So I'm going to be talking about database hosting options. You've heard a lot of that today. But I'm just going to shed a little bit of light there, just so you don't think it only resides in the Azure infrastructure or Azure ecosystem. I'm going to be talking about different databases and their usages. I'm going to talk about popular flavors of databases. I'm going to talk about what RDS is, supported RDS databases and labs. I'm just going to do a few labs today. Hopefully I'm going to have enough time. Then we're going to have a little summary and then the questions if you have any. So just jumping into the database hosting options, we do have, just like we have the same platforms in Azure, right? We have the IaaS, we have the PaaS, we have the SaaS. Now we have the database as a service. We even have backups as a service. So anything that is actually being provided as a service in the cloud, people have, decided to give it a name, right? So in the AWS ecosystem, we also have the self-host, it is called. And very clearly, it says this is where you manage the hardware, you manage the operating system, and you manage the database. So for example, you manage the VMware, you also install Windows on it or Linux or whatever operating system, you manage that, the patchings and the maintenance. You also manage the databases that you install on it, including backups, restores, etc. When you go into the IaaS, which stands for Infrastructure as a Service, AWS manages the hardware for you. So they provide you with the VMware and they say, go ahead and do whatever you want to do. Now, it is not referred to as VMware in AWS. It is called the EC2 instance. If I have some time, I can show you how to configure one today, even though it's out of scope. We have, so in IaaS, you manage the operating system. So you install an EC2 instance and then you go ahead and configure whatever operating system you have. It's pretty easy and simple. Most of the things in the AWS and the Azure Play world are very easy to configure because you just go ahead and choose the default options because you don't want people to charge a credit card. And but you go ahead and manage the database as well. But when you go into the PaaS, AWS manages basically everything for you, the hardware, the OS, and the databases. And we're going to look into a few of those, but we will be concentrating on the PaaS structure today. Anyway, so a lot of you know about SQL Server and Oracle. They're very popular RDBMSs. Fortunately, there are a lot more that have come out. A lot of them existed a long time ago, and some of them, are beginning to scale because of the scalability that has been needed in a lot of companies. We manage SQL Server infrastructures in Oracle. A lot of times we complain about performances because we've probably put an enterprise system on a database that was designed for a small one-stop shop that started a long time ago. And then we start having performance issues or scalability. They say, oh, we can no longer add drive space or storage space to that environment because now we have to migrate to another one. Well, we do have a lot of databases that have been designed for things like that, right? So these are the types of databases that you have in AWS. These are the use cases, like reasons why you would need them. If you want a high traffic web application, you go for Amazon DynamoDB. Let me see, give me a second. So the Amazon DynamoDB is actually a very, I went on to another slide. So the Amazon, so we have the RDS. Let me tell you what all those things are before I jump into the types of databases. So the RDS stands for Amazon Relational Database Service. It's a web service that makes it easier to set up, operate, and scale a relational database in the cloud. So in the Azure world, people talk about Azure SQL DB, which is the database that has been managed for you by the Azure, Microsoft Azure. They also have the managed instance, which is like you spinning up an EC2 instance and then putting a database on it. Now, in this case, it is different because when you spin up an EC2 instance, it asks you for the operating system and you can put it on there, but then you can go ahead and create your database. But when you're creating an RDS database, Amazon manages everything for you. They manage the patching, they manage the maintenance, they manage the scalabilities, etc. Right? Why would you choose an RDS database, right? It is very easy to administer, and I'm going to do that today. So with a few clicks, we'll have some databases spawn up. Most of these databases are databases that you see in job descriptions, and you're like, wow, I don't know about that, right? And we're talking about SQL Server. You're very familiar with that. A lot of you. We have MySQL. A lot of you might think it's very different, but I'll show you, like how you can spin that up in the AWS world today. We have PostgreSQL, we have Oracle, we have Aurora DB, and we also have the MariaDB. The RDS, which is the relational database system, is very easy to administer. It does not require any infrastructure, like I said. The storage is very scalable, and the read replicas. You can set this up with clicks of a button. The availability is very solid. They have what is called a multi-AZ deployment, where RDS is synchronously replicated to a standby instance in a different zone. So just like the Azure, where you can spin up your database here in Texas or the East Coast zone, and then you can replicate it in some Southwest. So whatever disaster happened here would not affect your database in another environment, and you can easily fail over if you have any disaster. It's very fast, right? It's been proven to have the same speed or even better speed if you compare it to the on-prem databases, but it has like a 1/10 cost, right? So it's very cheap, right? Cheaper to maintain. It's also very secure because it allows your databases to run in what is called a virtual private cloud. This is where you have your databases run in an kind of an isolated environment where you can only access it if you use like a virtual private network, right? So your company has a virtual private network, virtual private cloud. You can only access the databases in that environment using the company's or organization's virtual private network. If you're not given access to it, you can't access it. So it's pretty secure. Talk about encryption, that is also there automatically. It is very inexpensive, so you pay for what you use, right? So I'm going to show you today. I'm going to log into my AWS website today. It's the same thing you can do. Just get registered with your credit card. There is no charge as long as you don't click things that you're warned not to click. So we go down to the other databases that AWS houses. I'm not going to talk about a lot of that today, but we have the DynamoDB, which is a NoSQL DB. A NoSQL DB is basically a database that provides a mechanism for storage and retrieval of data, right? It's model, it's not tabular. So when we have the SQL Server, which stands for, when we have SQL, which is structured query language, it means that it is structured in a tabular form that you can retrieve data from it. But the DynamoDB is a NoSQL DB. NoSQL DB meaning it is non-relational, it is non-structured. It just dumps data in there and you pull data out. Let's see. So the DynamoDB, I'm just going to talk a little bit about it because I'm not going to be doing any lab on it today. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Redshift as well because I'm not going to be doing any lab on it. So the DynamoDB can handle more than 10 trillion requests per day. So it is a database that you can use for a fast-paced kind of project. In the world's fastest growing businesses such as Lyft, Airbnb, Redfin, all those websites that they have a whole lot of traffic every time, those kind of companies have used DynamoDB to be able to solve the traffic problem that they have in the website, right? So you don't want to go on a website like Airbnb and you're trying to book in for a holiday during the holiday season and they're like, oh, it's very slow. Well, you don't want that. So they use things like DynamoDB. It's a serverless DB, so it doesn't have any need for patching or for anything, right? It doesn't have any infrastructure, it doesn't rely on anything. The performance is at scale. You can build applications with virtually unlimited throughput and storage. DynamoDB has global tables, which you can replicate data across multiple AWS regions, which means East Coast, South Coast, wherever you want to replicate, and it's very fast. And the reason why you would replicate tables across different regions would be that if I am in California and I am logging to an Airbnb database and I am pulling data, right, from a website which pulls it from a certain table, and then the region is hosted in California, it's going to be pretty fast, right? You don't want to be in California and be pulling information from a table that is in like the central, right? Because it's not going to be very fast, that kind of thing. So what AWS does is they do a multi-zone replication of table so they can catch data in different places so that people can actually pull that data, especially if it's data that they know that people call a lot, right? When I say call, like from the website or retrieve. DynamoDB encrypts all data by default and provides fine-grained identity and access control to all tables. You can create full backups of hundreds of terabytes of data instantly with no performance impact, right? In SQL Server, when we do a little backup, they're like, oh, maybe that job was slow because of the backup. Well, you don't have that kind of problem when you're using DynamoDB, right? The Redshift is basically in the SQL Server world, we know about what is called a data warehouse, where you can dump your data in there for analytical purposes, right? Maybe you have the analytical team or reporting team, and they can have like 100 years of data in one database, and they kind of pull it from that to kind of do the analysis for maybe proposed future budget or something. Redshift is the data warehouse in the AWS environment. So that was kind of jumped past everything. I talked about the AWS RDS.
Danny, excuse me. Are you
Yes.
taking questions while you go, or you want to take questions at the end of?
Let me see. I think I'm 4:18 now, and I was given an hour. Let me see how far. Yeah, I can take questions because after this slide, I'm going to start doing some demos.
Okay, you talked about the replication or the high availability of the RDS databases in AWS. Are the secondary replicas, are they accessible with read write, or are they accessible in any format?
So the secondary replicas are accessible with read only. But I think there are two databases for AWS that you can configure for read write, right? Most of the times they're always for read only. I think it's MySQL or AuraDB. There's one of them that you can actually configure for read write. Now, that's another database that I actually haven't mentioned, the Amazon AuroraDB. Amazon AuroraDB is a database that actually accepts the MySQL and the PostgreSQL form of data. So let's say, for example, you had MySQL and PostgreSQL on-prem, and you wanted to migrate it to AWS. You don't need to put it in the MySQL, right? You can decide to put it in Amazon Aurora. It is compatible with the Postgres and the MySQL, right? And it's 5 times faster than a standard MySQL database, right? And I think 3 times faster than PostgreSQL. So those are like, and it can scale its storage up to 64 terabytes. So let's say, for example, it wants to run out of storage, it can automatically scale itself up, right, to 64 terabytes worth of data. But to come back to your question, Foster, yes, you can configure your replica databases in other zones where you can have them standby, right? Or people read from it, or you can read from yours, and you can configure. I think there are some databases that you can configure as many as 15 different replica databases. So AWS is quite flexible. Not to talk down on Microsoft, I'm still a Microsoft guy, but AWS has very interesting perks if you want to have a look at them. The other thing I wanted to talk about briefly from your question, Foster, was that there is also a multi-AZ catching, right, that you can do for AWS, where, for example, even if we're here in Texas and we have a company here in Texas, but we have people that, you know, download things from a website, like maybe videos or something in China, right? We can do a multi-AZ catching, right, into the China area so that whenever they're trying to download, it doesn't slow them down, right? And that's why you have different regions when you try to build these environments. It allows the speed, right? So that the people in the other environments can actually have the same access that you have and the same speed, or maybe better, depending on where you are. So these are supported RDS database engines. So before I got into AWS, I knew a lot about Microsoft Azure. I still use Microsoft Azure today. But then I was a little confused because when I heard Azure and AWS, and I only knew about, SQL Server going to Azure, of course. But I kind of thought this whole AWS thing, right? How would you install how would you even fix something else, right? When I started getting into it, I I realized that it was very interesting, right? I realized that you could even install SQL Server on it. You could install every other database on it. So you could actually migrate to AWS and kind of do the same things that you would do in SQL Server. I'm not going to go deep in configuring today, but the things that I'm going to do is probably going to give a lot of you confidence in going back to say, I didn't really know this database was like this. It is the same thing that I experienced when I started diving in. So we're going to configure a couple of these databases today. Don't let it bore you. They look the same in configuration because it's a demo. But when you're doing the real configuration at work and they need, like certain storage size for certain applications, etc., you need to do a whole lot of change, right? You need to change the way you configure things. So I'm going to configure MariaDB today. I'm going to install SQL Server today. I'm going to install MySQL. I'm going to install PostgreSQL today. I'm not going to install Oracle because the last time I checked, Oracle didn't give me an option for kind of free configuration that I wanted. So I was like, you know what, I'll leave it. They have two options. They're like, bring your own license, or you put in, they give you a license there for you to buy. Is that a question for me? Let's see. The second replicas of, oh, that was Foster's question. All right, so the tools that we're going to require today for the lab will be SSMS, which I'll use to connect to the SQL Server on AWS. We're going to need the MySQL Workbench, which I'm going to use to connect to the MySQL Server. We're going to use the pgadmin tool, which I'm going to use to connect to the PostgreSQL, and we're going to use the HeidiSQL, which is what I'm going to use to connect to the MariaDB. I do have an AWS account, so if you don't, when you want to do this, you need to create one. They will take your credit card number. They won't charge you anything except you create something that they will charge you, but they do warn you a lot. So when I created my AWS account, I did have what is called like a super user, but I did create my own account. So I used the super user, like the essay that you guys know in SQL Server. I used it to create myself an account. It is best practice that you don't use your super user all the time to log in. You might as well create yourself an administrator account that you can use to log in. So I'm going to log in as an IAM user. And just before we go to the labs, if you have any question, please throw it on me and I can answer it.
I have a question.
Go ahead, sir.
How long does the AWS account last? Because I know I created one in the past. I don't know if it's still active. I haven't checked on that. Just
to be honest, I did create one in the past like you, and that was a free account as well they gave to me. And it did last for a little while, and then they started warning me. So I'm not sure it has, I'm not sure about the time that it would last this time around. I only just created this one from the last one I did create, but it doesn't matter how long it lasts. If you're thinking that when that one expires, they're gonna charge you, you can always recreate another free account, right? The way it was before was that they would give you some money, right? And you would create a free account. Then you would use that money and kind of purchase like things, right? Or install things that required money. But you can also create a free account that doesn't require money and you can still stand things up like I'm gonna do today. So I'm not gonna spend any money today, but I'm gonna stand a couple things up, and we're gonna see how to connect them to them as well. We're also going to see how to connect from your local machine, because it is not just about spinning it up in AWS. It's about how do I even connect to this thing to make it look the same, right? Because when you have your on-prem installations, you know how to use your SSMS and just connect, right? But I'm going to show you how to connect to AWS accounts using your local machine as well, which will be very interesting. So does that answer your account question, sir?
Yes, yes, yes.
All right.
Thank you.
So it's I'm gonna just pop up another window right here. Did my presentation change? Can you see my Google window?
Yes, sir, we can see it.
Yes.
All right. So I'm gonna go to www.aws.amazon.com. Now, before I start this, I was gonna show you how to actually run an install for a PostgreSQL on-prem. Download and install a PostgreSQL on-prem database, and you would see how fast it would be configuring the same database in AWS, right? That's the point. But I'm going to go ahead and configure all the databases on AWS, and if I do have time, I will still show you how to do the whole on-prem configuration of the PostgreSQL, and you can make a decision and say, if they asked me to do like a proof of concept at work, right? Which database would I actually install? Would I go ahead and start downloading this guy, or would I just go ahead and use my free account, spin up this thing, create this table, insert this data, and tell them, hey, this is how it works, right? So let me go ahead and start. So if you haven't had an account before, it won't say sign in. It will ask you to register. Mine has signed me in automatically because I was just spinning up a few things here and there, and I just destroyed one EC2 instance. So I am logged into the Ohio US East 2. I don't know why, but that's where it logs me into. I haven't seen anything closer. So spinning up things might spin for a little while. So what I could do is I might flip screens and go ahead and spin up another database using another window. So before you start, if you don't see anything here that says recently visited, AWS has a lot of services. That's why I couldn't go through all of the services. And I told Moses I was only going to concentrate in databases, just so you don't think about anything big. So the job of a solutions architect mostly is to understand the infrastructure of a company and design a story that you have been told, right? And design the project in your head and play it out there, knowing the whole infrastructure so that it comes into completion and it makes sense to the company, right? Something called acceptance criteria in the world of Scrum. So the company tells you a story and they give you an acceptance criteria, and you, in your head, you design it and you play it out there. You kind of have a lot of knowledge about the infrastructure of a company. So the services here in AWS is so much. You don't have to focus on all of it. There is a specialty certification with AWS. It's called AWS Databases. So you just know databases. So a customer or your company can say, hey, we do have this sort of thing. We do need to do this. And straight away you can say, okay, this is the recommended database if we're going on the AWS platform, right? That if you have that specialty, you can go ahead and route yourself that way. So from a SQL Server database administrator point of view, if you get fed up like me someday and say, I'm tired of being a DBA and you want to do something else, you can do things like that. If you look at the services and you don't really see what you want, you can come in the search button and kind of type RDS. Sorry, my typo. If I hit RDS, it opens a portal for me, and then it tells me to create a database, right? So I'm already in the RDS instance. it says, so if I hit databases here as well, oops, it says that I already have a MySQL DB that I created. I remember when I created that, but I can go ahead and delete that. All right, while it's deleting, I'm just gonna go ahead and start doing something else. So let's go ahead and create our first database, which is the MariaDB. So if I hit create database here, it shows me, if I want to standard create, you can read all the little details. We don't really have time today, so I'm just going to be a little fast, but hopefully you'll be able to grab one or two. So I'm going to use a standard create. The easy create just takes away a lot of configurations, but I'm going to use the standard create, and I'm going to allow a lot of default choices. You can see here it specifies all the allowed RDS databases, database engines, and you can decide to choose any one. We're going to choose almost all of them except the Oracle today. So the first one we want to create is the MariaDB. When I hit the MariaDB, it gives you versions, right? You can choose the versions of MariaDB that you want, depending on your own installation need. I'll just go ahead and allow it to stay there at default. And then it asks you if you want to choose production, dev test, or free tier. When you choose production, it kind of gives you more options, right? And it starts giving you options where they're going to charge your card, etc. So I'll go ahead and choose the free tier. It asks you for a database instance name. So this database instance name is basically your instance, right? So say, for example, you're installing SQL Server, you choose an instance name, whether it's default or named. In this case, I'm going to name it. And then you can go ahead and create your own database. So of course, people who already have knowledge of instance, you know what it means. So because I'm creating a test MariaDB instance, I'm just going to call it MariaDB test, or MariaDB, whatever. Then it asks me for credentials. So there is something like a super user, like your SA, when you're installing SQL Server. Probably just going to say administrator, and I'm going to provide a password. All right. So it goes ahead and starts to talk about the instance size. Well, this is default because we chose a free tier, 1 vCPU, 1 GB RAM, etc. Just go ahead and allow those things at default. When you choose production, it's going to give you more options. And of course, if you're at work, then they would have told you, okay, this is the kind of size that we need. But that's just leave that as well for now. It gives you a general purpose and the 20 GB storage space. Leave it as is, because if you try to choose something more, you're gonna get charged. Let's see. So that's availability and durability. Foster, you asked. This is where you choose your multi-AZ, but we can't choose it now because we are actually on a free tier. So when you go into production tier, there is a lot of things that it actually gives to you. Connectivity is the default VCP. VCP is the private cloud that I told you guys about. So I'll let mine at default. If I click here for it to extend, you can create your own VCP. So you can create your own private cloud connection. I'm going to choose public access. The reason why I'm choosing public access is so that it will allow me to connect from my local machine. All right. As you can see here, it has chosen the default VCP security groups for me. And I have chosen yes, so that I will be able to access this Amazon database or MariaDB from my local machine. This is the port 3306. When you're creating, you need to pay attention to the port because you're going to need it when you're connecting from your local machine using your connecting tool. So when I expand the additional configuration here, it asks for the database options. Now you can choose to create a database name here, or you can choose to not create it. Whenever your instance has been spun up, you can go ahead and create your own database if you want to. So for example, if I go ahead here and say test DB, I will create a database now. So when we spin up the instance, we can see the test DB. Backup enabled. I don't want backup to be enabled just because we're doing a test, so I'm not very interested. But this is where you can set up your backups. This is where you can set the retention period of your backup and say choose the number of days that you can retain your passwords. Oh, sorry, your backup. You can scroll down and choose how many days that you want. But I'm gonna uncheck this, and there is a window period here that you can choose and schedule your backups that you want to happen, right? But I don't want all that, so I'm just going to disable it because I don't need it. This is where you can also choose. Yep, go ahead.
So on the backup retention, this is a little bit different from Azure there. So my question is, AWS doesn't have any kind of static retention policy like Azure, where we have like 7 days, 14 and 35 days in this one. How does this work, and how long can you keep your
I mean, if you don't choose this, it will do the backup for you. So just the retention is what I'm not sure about, but I'm sure when you choose the production database, it kind of gives you the real life scenario of what you really want and how long time, like maybe the settings of how long it can keep it for you. But since this is like a test environment, right, it allows you to set what you want, how long you want it for, and if you really want it enabled. But there is the automatic, because this is like your SQL database that is managed by AWS, right? Well, the other one is managed by Microsoft. So they will take care of everything for you. They have their own timings and retention period and everything. And remember, when they spin up the database, they spin it up in another environment for you. So no matter what you need, they will give it back to you, right? It's set up that way. That's why it's the RDS. But you can choose also schedules that you want. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if I click the enable backup, it's just gonna enable it, but then I'm gonna be allowed to choose what I want, right? If I don't choose what I want, then of course Amazon will do whatever they want to do for me. That means I have allowed them to take care of, maybe you read their white papers and you see that their backups happen at 10 p.m. every day and you have a crash. Well, whether you have a crash or not, it won't affect them because they have your databases replicated in other availability zones. But I'm just not going to choose backup in everything I'm going to do today. I don't need it. When I'm done, I'm just going to destroy all the environment. So it's 4:39, and I believe I have about 20 minutes left. So at least let me be able to configure one or two. You can also click on your logs here and choose where you want your audit log to happen, right? There is something called CloudWatch logs in AWS. This is where you set it up and it sends you alerts about your logs, etc., right? Slow query log, etc. Like you can choose all these things and it will send it to the CloudWatch logs dashboard for you and you can check that. So this is the IAM role. You can set up an IAM role. This is out of the database scope. It is when you're configuring your IAM user that you can do that. There is also maintenance here, right? Auto version upgrade. So auto version upgrade just means like, let's say for example that, auto minor version upgrade just means like if you were going from one version to a next version. Say for example, you are in, let's go here real quick and just look at the versions. So let's say, for example, that you're going from MariaDB 10.4 to MariaDB 10.323. That is a minor upgrade, right? Amazon will automatically do that for you. But let's say that you were going from 10.4.8 to 10.0.28 or something, right? That will require for you to manually do the upgrade for yourself. So that is called a major version upgrade. So now selecting everything, looks like we're all done. We don't want a maintenance version window. We don't want to upgrade. So I'm just gonna uncheck that. Deletion protection, if I check this, that means when I'm trying to delete the database, it's accidentally, it's going to stop me from deleting it and asks me or tells me that I can delete it. So if you choose that, that will not allow you to do anything. Anyway, so estimated monthly cost, you can see that everything here is free with all the things that I have chosen. And then all I have to do is go ahead and hit create database. When you hit create database, it pops up this window. You can see that your database is spinning. The status here says creating. You can go ahead and keep on refreshing this until your database has been created. All right, and that's the MariaDB test. So while this is spinning, I'm just gonna go ahead and create another database since I don't have enough time. It says you're creating database. So maybe I will not create SQL Server because you guys already know a lot about SQL Server. So I'm probably just gonna go ahead and create PostgreSQL. So create a database, I'm gonna go standard. So I'm not gonna explain a lot here because it's about the same process that you go through. Just choose the dev test process. Go in here, I'm just gonna call this PostgreSQL DB instance. The master username, I'm gonna call it administrator so I don't forget. I'm gonna put in the same password. Database instance, I'm gonna allow it to stay as default. It doesn't really matter, we're not gonna load anything up, and it always gives you like 20 gigabyte of storage. Enable storage auto scaling, well, we may need that or not. I don't think we're gonna need it, but I'll just let it. Enabling storage scaling just means that maybe your storage gets to full at night. You don't have to call a sysadmin to say, hey, or a storage engineer to say, grant me more storage. It will just scale by itself. Multi-AZ, again, this is the same thing. The VPC is your virtual private cloud. Additional connectivity, I'm just gonna say yes, so I'll be able to connect from my local machine. This is a different port for the PostgreSQL, and it asks you how you want to authenticate, right? But I'm just gonna leave it at password authentication that I have created. Additional configuration, initial database name, I can just call it, you know what? I will just leave it so that I will create a database in Postgres and you can see something different. Enable backup, I will allow that as disabled. Enable encryption, I don't really care. Enable performance inside, I don't care about all that. Enable monitoring, enhanced monitoring. So all these things are granular things. You can see how you can actually monitor the things that are going to go on in your environment if you allow all these things to be set up. But just because it's tests and I don't have a lot of time, I will just uncheck all those things like maintenance, etc. I don't need a maintenance window, and basically that's it. So it prices me up to $262 a month, right? Wow. So there's probably something that I chose that is going to price me that, but it's okay. I'm sure it's not going to charge me up to that. So I will just allow that. Okay, there you go. So I chose the dev test. That's why it's trying to charge me all that. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit the free tier. And then I'll allow everything to be as is. So please make sure you always choose the free tier. You can see that 200 and something dollars has just disappeared. So now I'm happy because no one will charge me. So if you look here, my MariaDB says it is now available, while my PostgreSDB says it is being created, all right? So let's go ahead and connect to the MariaDB. So to connect to the MariaDB, I do need what is called HeidiSQL. Thank God I already installed all my, or I already downloaded all my, what's it called? Already downloaded all my tools so I can use them for this installation. So for the host name, I'm gonna come down here to where you have, Just give me a second. So where you have the endpoint, take note of the port number as well. So when I copy this endpoint, and the port number is 3306. So when I go in here and I can paste this here as my host name. So you paste the endpoint as your host name, and then what was the 3306 is the port number, 3306. So
Annie, quick question.
yes, sir.
So the session manager, is it like a client tool or you got it from the portal as well?
So it is called MySQL. So MySQL is a client tool like your SSMS that you download. Does that make sense?
Is it free?
Yes, it is free. It is open source.
What was the name again? I didn't catch that.
MySQL, H-E-I-D-I. So that was an older session that I connected to. So I'm going to create a new session now. The new session here, I'm going to paste the host name, which was my endpoint. And I'm going to put in the administrator account. I'm going to put in the password.
I'm trying to put the client name on the chart so that everybody can get it. Please, can you spell it one more time?
H-E-I-D-I. I think I have it here. I had it in my introduction. I can post it.
Yes, I already posted it.
All right, thank you. So settings for unnamed were changed, yes. So straight away, this connects me to the MySQL client, and you can see the test database that we created right here, right? So this is what the client looks like. I have now been connected to my, what's it called? My MariaDB, and this is where you can go ahead and click the query here, and you can write your query here. So say, for example, I have a query that I was going to create a table. I can go ahead and paste it right here. I'm just putting the delete table just in case it exists, and then the drop, the create table as well. And then I hit execute. Your query produced one warning. I'm not sure what that warning is, but I believe I'm okay. So if we refresh that, you can see, oops, okay, that's because I didn't put a table name that I wanted, but if you want me to create another table, I can just say test table, right? And I can go ahead and hit the execute again. It says it already exists. Create test table, sorry, I put it here. Test table, all right. So if I go ahead and hit execute here, it should create another table here in our test database called test table. If I refresh the database and expand it, we should see our test table database. So basically, that's how you connect, right? You install your MariaDB, you download the MySQL, and then you connect to the MariaDB. Let's go ahead and rush to connect to the PostgreSQL. Hopefully it's done. So that at least I would have been able to connect to at least two databases just before we finish. So the PostgreSQL is done. All right, and it says that it is available. Again, you can see the similarities when we connected to the MariaDB. Oh, sorry, this is the PostgreSQL. That's the MariaDB, I'm sorry. So this is the PostgreSQL. It says it's available now. You can see it also has the endpoint, but it has a different port number, right? So I can copy the endpoint. Now I'm gonna connect to the tool that you would use to connect the PostgreSQL, and that is called pgadmin. These tools are the same tools as the SSMS, as you would use them to connect to SQL Server. So you can just have the tools on your computer and just keep them there. And whatever company you go to and they have these different databases, you can use the same tool to connect to them. So I'm gonna pop open my pgadmin tool. It has a slightly different interface and it asks me for a password, right? For a master password. I'm gonna hit cancel because I want to add a server, right? So I click add a server. And then,
Sorry, Annie, what does pgadmin?
So pgadmin is a tool, right? Just like SSMS. Does that make sense? Just like MySQL. So just like SSMS is to SQL Server and MySQL is to MariaDB, pgadmin is to PostgreSQL.
Okay, just a quick one, Annie.
Yes.
We're going to have a 15 minutes break, but since we took that long break, we can as well just inculcate that into your time so you can end by 6:30 p.m.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate
Oh,
that. So, okay, because of that, let me run here and answer this question that Moses just asked. So Moses, if you remember when I said we're going to look for tools, so we use SSMS to connect to SQL Server Management Studio, SQL Server. We use MySQL Workbench to connect to MySQL. We use pgadmin to connect to PostgreSQL, and we use MySQL to connect to MariaDB.
Gotcha, awesome.
Right. So we have created all these databases in AWS, right? And we have it all listed. So having them all listed in AWS doesn't help us a lot, right? So how do we now connect, right? So we have these databases here listed, all of them, databases. I've created 2 of them already. But someone can go into their company and log into aws.com and see the databases, but how do they connect is a problem, right? When I started as a SQL Server database administrator, someone gave me a brand new laptop in a new job, right? That was paying me a lot of money and asked me to connect to SQL Server using the RDP. I stood there for 40 minutes. I didn't even know how to connect. So connection may be a big problem to people, but they don't know it. When I first connected to PostgreSQL in the company that I started using it, they gave me all the accesses. The guy gave me all the accesses, admin, password, everything. And then I went and sat down on my desk. I'm like, how do I even connect to this thing, right? So connection is a problem. That's why I'm showing you guys all the tools that you can use and how you can connect to these databases after you have installed them. So pgadmin, as you can see, runs in a browser, right? So it doesn't, even if you have installed it on your computer, it runs via a browser as a service. So now that we've got into a pgadmin tool, like our SSMS, right? For you guys who do SQL Server, and for the Oracle guys, it's the SQL Developer or maybe Toad or anything else. We're gonna go ahead and give our connection a name. So you can give it any name. I can call mine Postgres Connect. And then it asks me for server group, background and all that stuff. I'm not really interested. And I go into connection and it asks me for a host name. This is where I actually paste my endpoint again that I copied from AWS. Remember, this is the endpoint. Where is the RDS databases, Postgres. This is the endpoint, right? The endpoint. This is what you always put in the host name. There are different endpoints for different databases. So I go back in here. I'm sorry, I'll close that out. So I've put in my endpoint here and I've put in my port number. I just need to confirm that it's 5432. So I go back in here and it's 5432 and it's all connected. And then, yes, go ahead.
It's like, I don't know if it's from an end that it's like, I can't see any change from the screen. It's like, what I can see is still AWS. I can see what you're doing.
Is that correct? Sorry, is that for everybody else?
I don't think it's for everybody.
It should be from your side because the screen has changed.
Yeah, we're seeing the live screen, maybe from your end.
Sorry, sir, if you're not seeing, but I think this is recorded because this is really important. It might be very basic, but honestly, for you to just know this connectivities and installations and all this stuff. And thank you for the time, Mike, because I'm going to perform a backup and restore when we get to MySQL DB. Just I'm doing one or two things when we get to one database or not. So this is the port number 5432. And if we go to the AWS, you can see the confirmation. We come back here and the username and password, remember I created an administrator username, and I call the password I hope so. So I'm just trying to confirm that that's my secret password. Sorry, guys.
Your very, very secret password.
I know. I hope you haven't seen it though.
Oh.
So when we're done with that, you know, putting your endpoints in that, all you have to do is hit save. And then it asks me for, please set a master password for PG admin. So I go ahead and set. I go ahead and set and I hit OK. And I hit save. And everything looks good. So now if you look on the left, it shows that a server has been connected. Postgres Connect, right? If I expand it, it shows databases. If I expand it, there is always a default database called Postgres. These are, you know, this is how the dashboard is. You can go ahead and hit SQL here and type in your query, right? Do whatever you want. You can actually right click here and say create and create a database just like you would do, you know, in your normal SSMS, do whatever you want. It's pretty easy and basic. Oops, sorry. Oops, okay, it says yes. I mean, let me just go ahead and create something. So let's say a database is called, blah, 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 let's say test, right? Test database. Say that again?
Test DB.
Yeah, I'll do test DB. It's owned by the administrator, doesn't matter. I can just hit here save. And if we go ahead here, you can see that the test DB shows connected, right? So I can go ahead and create a whole lot of things. You might think about logins and all that. Postgres is a little similar to SSMS, right? Oh, sorry, the PG admin. So you can go ahead and create all this. All these things can also be connected using their own CLI tools, right? So if you're downloading Postgres, for example, from the internet, it has like its own CLI tools that you can use, right? Command line interface for those guys who are asking. Now let's go ahead and try a little create table statement here and see, you know, what we can do. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Let's say during the time that you were creating this database in AWS,
Yes.
there was a place there that you have to allow AWS to generate a password. So when you come now to PG admin to log in, does that password auto-populate where you have to put in the password, or how does it work if you allow AWS to generate you a password?
So AWS allows you to generate a password to get into PG admin, right? Which is the one that I generated, PG admin and the password. The other password that it is asking me for is the Postgres password. So Postgres that you saw is like the master guy, like the SA, right? Kind of, there's a, so there are root users in a lot of environments that require their own passwords that you can use. So the administrator is also a guy that I created in AWS, right? But there is a root user, right? That it was looking for the RDS admin guy. It was looking for its own password. So I just gave it a password. Now, if we were logging in using the web portal, like say we downloaded AWS and everything, there is a place where it would ask for the password. I think that's what you're asking, and I would provide it. So when I'm trying to log in, it would ask for that same password. But AWS, for some reason, asks you always to generate an admin user that you're going to use to connect to that environment, first of all, before you can do any configuration. So that's why I really wanted to show you guys how to install it using the on-prem version, right? Because it's slightly different, even though when you get into the portal, when you get into the tool like this, it looks the same. So Michael is very gracious to give me time to at least show you guys a couple more databases, and I will see what happens close to the end of this if I have to grant something free.
You have 15 minutes.
How many minutes how many minutes more do I have?
15, 1-5.
Oh, 15, all right. So SQL, no SQL could be generated for the selected object. I'm sorry, that's not what I wanted. This is my test. Okay, so let me so anyway, this is how we connect to the, since they say I have 15 minutes, it is very important to show you the last thing that I would have really loved you to show. It is more important than creating a table and inserting data. At least you see what the portal looks like. Let me go ahead and do this very quickly. I see if I can finish this in 15 minutes. I'm going to create a MySQL database and also connect to it. And this time around, I'm going to do a backup and restore of MySQL. It's a little bit different, but just slightly interesting. So I'm going to choose a MySQL database here. It is still spinning the version, so I'll just let it go to 8.0.17. I'll choose the free tier. Basically, everything looks the same, right? Just very slight differences. MySQL DB is the instance name, and the administrator password I'm just going to supply here. I'll try and make everything the same so that I do not forget. So the DB instance name, I'll leave it as default. I don't want to pay any money. Everything is default. Enable storage auto scaling, that really doesn't matter. The availability group, AZ deployment, you can see it's already grayed out because we're not in production. I'll leave the VPC connection as default. I will choose public access so that I will be able to access it with my tool. This is the port number 3306, and I will be connecting using my password. If we go into additional configuration, I can decide to create a name and call it, I might just create, what's it called? Database here, let's call it customer. Oops. So that will be the database that we'll expect to see. Enable automatic backup. I really don't need it. I don't need monitoring. I don't need to see the logs. Again, we are testing. So when you're in your production environment, please endeavor to do all those things. Enable auto minor version upgrade. So this is like SQL Server patching, right? It wants to do the upgrade for me whenever it's necessary, but I don't want it because it's test instance. Maintenance window, there is no maintenance window, and I don't want to enable the protection for deletion of the database. As you can see, it is a free tier for the monthly cost, and all I have to do is go ahead and hit create database, and it will start spinning. That will be my third database to create. Just in case you wanted to delete a database because of time, if I don't come back here and finish up, I just want to show you how you can go ahead and do that. So disconnect here, close here. I don't want it. Code is saving anyway, or restoring. Nope, I don't want that. So we can go ahead here, and that was the MariaDB. So you just check that for that database. You said, I don't want this instance anymore. So go to actions and then go ahead and hit delete. And then it will ask you a question if you want to create a snapshot. If you choose for it to create a snapshot, it will create it and keep it for you. When you're creating the next database next time, it's going to ask you if you want to create it from a snapshot, right? But because I will never create this again, I don't care about it, I don't need it, I uncheck that box, but I acknowledge that this is me deleting the database. And it says type delete me. It does this all the time. So I'll go ahead and do delete me and I hit delete, all right? That will sit there and spin for a while I wait for my MySQL database to create itself. It's still creating. And I have for 14 minutes, they said. Is it 14 minutes left? I guess.
You have 10 minutes left.
All right, no problem. I will make sure I use my 10 minutes judiciously. So you might think that this is wasting a lot of time spinning. In Azure, it is the same thing. It takes a little while to spin up all these processes and give you exactly what you want. But once it's done, you know, it has a different level of speed. So let me hope that the MySQL gets created as soon as possible. While we wait for that to be created, do we have any question whatsoever?
Annie.
Yes, sir.
Annie. Oh, go ahead.
Annie, do you ever
Yes.
do, apart from AWS creation of database and all that, do you ever do migration, like migrating from on-prem to AWS? And if you do, what kind of storage do you use? And to be able to, for you to be able to copy a backup from on-prem to the AWS sites. So how do you do that, and how do you migrate?
So I haven't done migration with AWS, but AWS has its own migration service, right? It also has its own VM, right? Where you can actually copy a backup to the VM, which is the EC2 instance that I was gonna show you guys, but because of time, I'm not gonna be able to create it. So it has its own migration service that you can use and of course supply the parameters, which I believe should be about the same thing. So if we go into services, go into the dashboard here and you go into services here, where are you? Services. If you just type something like migration, it should be able to, there you go. So it has the database migration service. And honestly, you can go in here and play with it. Just like I said, register some time. You don't have to do anything. Apparently you can watch a video here and they have a lot of white papers that you can read, right? And they can show you how to do all this migration. But
Okay.
it should be basically the same, right?
Okay, Annie, follow-up question. So
Yeah.
as a AWS architect solution, do you, all you just do is just creation of database to
No.
No.
The reason why I chose the creation of database here was because it was an overview course that I could show you in an hour, right? How to do. So let's say, for example, that I had time and I had to show you how to do a migration, I probably would have done that and just shown it to you. So the solutions architect role, like I explained initially, requires you to understand a whole lot about the infrastructure of a company. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Annie.
Yeah, you're welcome. So as you can see, my SQL database is ready and available. And I know that people are timing me and I have 6 minutes. So I'm just gonna jump in immediately and at least connect to it and see if I can do at least a backup. So again, I'm gonna grab my endpoint here. And this time around, I'm gonna use what is called my SQL Workbench. And I just clicked on it and it popped open. And then I would go here and hit plus, right? The plus sign means new connection. And I would call my connection name MySQL test. All right, in the host name, I go ahead and paste my endpoint name. And in the username, I go ahead and type my administrator login. And so this one is different. So you go ahead and hit the store in Vault for your password, so that whenever you type your password here, it's going to kind of store it somewhere for you. That's my password, if you guys can see. And I hit OK. You can test the connection to see if it actually connects. And it says it successfully made a connection. And then I can hit OK. Straight away, it opens, it connects me to somewhere. And then I click on this guy and it starts to open. It starts to initialize and then it opens, and you can see the database that I created and I called it customer, right? All right, that's the database that I created. Now it gives you a query window, which you can also type in your SQL Server queries to create whatever objects that you want. All right, so I'm going to quickly create a table. And I'm going to call that table the person table. All right. So I'll go ahead and select it and this and execute. First name, last name, error. You have an error in your SQL syntax. Check the manual that corresponds. Wow. So let's see what I did here. Oh, actually, maybe I didn't use the use database statement. So go. Let's try this. All right. Oops. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and create the table manually. Not sure what is wrong with my code. I can debug it right now. It's asking me for a table name, so I just call it person, right? Actually, this is another way that you can create a table real quick. So I can go here and right click for a table and say create table like, right? I can go here and say create table like categories, for example, and it already populates the table for me, right? And it populates everything, and you can click whatever you want. You can look at indexes or whatever you want, and the columns already populated. Because of time, I hit apply, and then it shows you the SQL query. So you can actually carry this query and go and execute, or you can just hit apply and it executes the query and it creates a table for you, right? That is a very fast way, just because of what. Now look at my table called category, right? So I can decide to back up this table. I have about 2 more minutes left. So I can decide to back up this table called category by going to server. All right, in server, I have what is called data export. So I hit data export and it populates this for me. It says, what database do you want to back up? And I click this one here to select the customer database. And if you come down here, it says, do you want to back up the stored procedures and functions? No, because I don't have any. Do you want to back up events or triggers? No, because I don't have any. Where exactly do you want to back up? And over here, it asks you if you want to back up only the data, only the structure, or data and structure. So I say I want to back up data and structure, and it asks me where I want to put in the file. So I have chosen a path here where I want to put in the file. I'm going to copy this spot and keep somewhere so that whenever I come back, I will remember where we're going to restore it from if I have enough time. So everything looks good, and I hit here. Now, if you choose the export to dump file, it's going to store your files in, it's going to store your backup in different files. But when you choose export to self-contained file, it's going to store it in one SQL file, all right? So this is where I want it to be, and I include a create schema statement, and I do start export, right? When I hit start export, I can go in here to the export progress. You can see that it says completed. So it has already backed up my table, right? So I can go here, and I can go to, now that I know that it's backed up, I can go ahead and right click on category. Very quickly, I'm almost done, and I can drop the table. I say drop now. I don't want that table. If we expand customer database, we don't see the table, right? So how do we go ahead and import, right, restore in the SQL Server world? How do we go ahead and restore that database again? So you go into server and you go into data import, and you go in here and you paste that guy that you wanted. You can choose here and you can see the file. Where did I even put that file? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So go ahead and import from self-contained file, right? And it automatically puts in the file for you, but you can go ahead here and check wherever it is that you put in the file, right? And you can go ahead and choose that. Just the same thing you would do in restoring a database in SQL. So you go ahead and choose that. Then you come down. I mean, everything looks good here. My customer is the database that you want to restore. And then I believe I have checked everything because of time. I go ahead and do start. It said doesn't exist. Oops, something happened. So I don't have enough time, but that is, there is something that I didn't do properly. I probably didn't choose the right file. But anyway,
the rushing was much, but we got the
yeah. I mean, you get it. It's pretty easy. You don't have to do anything. I think there is something that I probably didn't choose correctly, but that's how you actually import or backup and restore in the MySQL world. So in overview, just to round up, we have been able to, just give me a second. Let me go to my last slide. We've been able to talk about the virtual private cloud. We've talked about the different tools that you can use to connect. We've talked about the different databases offered by AWS, concentration in some RDS databases. Unfortunately, we couldn't do all of them, but that's honestly a lot for you to go back and review and probably, bump up your resume and say, okay, now I understand these things are not, rocket science. They're not very different. They're just basic things that you can do every day. We've done a couple installations and connections, which are very important. You can download those tools. You don't have to pay for them. But yeah, that's about a lot of some of the popular AWS databases. And I hope that you had learned something. Thank you very much for your time, guys. I do appreciate. I know it is late and you've stayed this much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Annie.
Nice one, Annie. Nice one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Nice job.
All right.
Oh.